And so you hear and see at 5:07, the defendant leaves Meadows. She leaves. And Kaylee is behind waiting. And you see her back up, and Judd Welch just showed you all of those demonstrations where you could see the unsettled snow in the back, and after the bump, you can see the pieces missing, no taillight. There's no taillight on the ground, all the white snow. There's no crack, there's no break. It's a nudge. It's a nudge. But the taillight has already been broken, because when you look at the video, not one little piece, it's still framed, little angle with the light, the brakes are, you take a look, you'll be able to slow it down. You'll see the exact same piece is missing. Because it's back at Fairview. That's why it's missing. It's not there, it's back at Fairview. And then she leaves at 5:07. She gets to Jen McCabe's about, 5:35? 28 minutes. It's about a 10-minute ride. Where does she go in 28 minutes? Where does she go? We don't know. We don't have data for that. But we know when she gets to Jen McCabe's house, she is panicked, frantic, out of her mind, screaming, waking everybody up. Jen McCabe comes down, can't understand her, going out to the car to try to console her. Why is she so frantic? Why can't she speak? Why can't she say a word? Because John went out and had a drink and fell asleep on a couch? Because John would maybe be cheating on her? What is causing this extraordinary duress? Did she stop somewhere on the way by? Did she just see death?
Did she just see death? On the morning of January 29th, Karen Reed left her house at 5:07 a.m. We know that. She arrives at Jen McCabe's house at 5:35 a.m. This, guys, is the moment right here. If the jury convicts Karen Reed, it will be this point right here that many, I think, are probably too caught up in everything else that this case is, in the other trial that had lots more evidence, in the files that are not in that jury room. This is the type of thing that a juror back in that jury room can take and sway the entire jury. Now, I'm not telling you that I think Karen Reed should be convicted. I think there's plenty of reasonable doubt in the case. I'm just telling you that that moment that you just saw right there, that 28-minute gap for what should have been a 10-minute drive, and what he did with those 28 minutes, how he sold the jury on what those 28 minutes mean, is something that, just like when we had the Ferris trial, and we all, many thought that was going to be a hung jury or a not guilty. How she moved the body. How does she do this? This case, it's the dog bites. It's the dog bites on the arm. Somebody just says, listen, it's very simple. She had a consciousness of guilt. And the case that the prosecution is selling here is not one that is really that hard to believe. It happens all the time. People get drunk. I said a long time ago at the very beginning of this trial, I don't remember if I went on air and said it. I think I did in one of the early lives. And I said that one of the key components that came out that Hank Brennan was putting before the jury was the conversation between Jen McCabe and John O'Keefe, where a triggering point was said. A previous lover of John's was brought up. You have a drunken Karen. We know they have a history of fighting. We know they have a history of getting volatile fighting. And it's that is the tinder that sets up the fire off. And then it becomes very simple for a jury back in that jury room, because this jury wasn't privy to a lot of the information that came out. They didn't see the Alperts come on and testify. They didn't see Higgins come on and testify in this trial. They don't get the benefit of that testimony, nor are they allowed to consider it, because they didn't have it. It didn't happen in their trial. And it's that right there, ladies and gentlemen, that I think is going to be the problem that could very well lead to the conviction of Karen Reed, and it will be a shocking thing. Now, does that mean she's going to get convicted of second degree? No, it doesn't. I think that this is, if it leads to a conviction, it'll be conviction of manslaughter. But for Karen Reed, that's 5 to 20 years in prison. And with Bev Canone, she's getting 20 years. I mean, that's the end of the story. So let's break down exactly what Brennan tells the jury. All right, so according to Brennan, what Kerry did in the Gap wasn't an accident. It was a return trip to the crime scene. That's what he's saying. That's what that clip means. That's what he argued. Not just to look, not just to drive past, but to see where she left him. He says that she goes back to the crime scene and checks him. And the question is, did she leave at 5:07 and go? What happened? Where's the data? What occurs? This is a missing time frame that the defense doesn't account for. This is a missing time frame that the state's evidence doesn't account for. Now, do understand one of the key things here in the way that Massachusetts structures things is the state goes last. They don't get a first and a third, right? They don't get by third I mean the rebuttal argument. They go last. So this was not brought to the jury. The defense didn't get a chance to counter this, which is kind of a disadvantage to the defense because the defense is arguing all these other things. And then Brennan comes in and drops this bomb and says, what about this 20? Now, if the defense has a chance to argue it, and hopefully there's somebody back there that will say, listen, the fact that data doesn't exist is a problem for the state, not the defense. So that should be a defense. That should be a check in the box of defense. But Brennan is a defense attorney. He understands how to argue to a jury and make an winning argument, and that's what he's doing here. And that is the real issue here in this case. To me, I think that it's a disadvantage. I know that normally what happens is the state goes first, the defense goes second, and then the state follows up. Massachusetts does it differently, but he uses this. He's using that against the defense to raise this issue, and it's now unrebutted. It's the last thing, one of the last things that the jury hears before they're given the case. All right, so let's take a look at what's the theory that he's working with here. So he's, his theory on this, and this is his theory. I'm not saying it's true, but I'm saying this is a theory, and you have to understand how juries are. And when you're back in that jury room, they get to rely on their memory, and they have to rely on a 33-day trial. And this is going to be something that can become a very, very strong argument, a snowballing strong argument when somebody says, why did she go back? And this is what he's saying. He says, she didn't go back, not just to look, not just to drive past. She went back. She goes, and the question he says is, did she stop somewhere on the way back? Did she just see death? Did she just see death? That's Brennan's phrase. It's not rhetorical, and it's huge. He's telling the jury, she went back. She saw him. She knew he was dead. And instead of calling for help, she makes a decision. She pivots. She calls Kerry Roberts, not 911. She goes and she stages a scene. And what that is, if the jury accepts this, and the jury has the right to accept it, but what that means, as those jurors are pondering this back there, what that means is that she had a consciousness of guilt, meaning she decides, instead of calling for help, instead of getting him help, she decides to set something up because she has memories. She knows what she did, and she goes back and she confirms what she did. And that's how he's presenting this. And she then begins to stage the allegation. And then he says, okay, then he brings up this statement. And again, as you can see, this is why closing arguments is the place where you start to see the entire strategy of the state. The entire strategy of the case comes together because he pulls this statement out. He says, Karen Reed calls Kerry and says, John's dead. I think he got hit by a plow. What he's saying is that in the moment, and these are why statements like that are not considered hearsay, they're allowed in because they're what's called spontaneous utterances, and they're in the moment. And they're in the moment that they're being said, so they're considered to be very truthful and very honest because they don't. The litmus test is, did she have time to make something up in that moment? And she's hysterical, and she's saying these things. It's not just bad phrasing, which is what the defense argues it was, but she says, according to the prosecutor, that's an intentional misdirection. It's an effort to substitute what she did and put that in front and say, oh my God, did he get hit by a snowplow? Because she knows what they're going to see. So what he's trying to say is she's planting that into Kerry Roberts' head to explain what she knows is coming because she's already been to the scene and seen it. She's already confirmed that, oh my God, that's exactly what happened, whatever, that she goes back. And the point is, if she did go back to 34 Fairview instead of going to anywhere else first, but she goes there first, there's a reason why she goes back there, because she wakes up. Remember, she was extremely intoxicated. She passes out for a little bit. She wakes up. Think of things when you wake up. You've got pieces, you got fragments. You're like, oh my God, did that just happen? And what does she do? She goes back to 34 Fairview and she discovers his body, if you're believing what Hank Brennan says, because there's this unaccounted for time. She goes back, she discovers the body, she goes, she calls Kerry, and she says, oh my God, John's dead. I think he got hit by a plow. So, that's devastating if the jury accepts that. Not only that, but when she arrives, as he points out, she's frantic. She's panicked. She's in a state of mind that she shouldn't be in right now at this moment, because at this particular moment, she's just thinking to herself, John hasn't come home. Did he stay at the party that I dropped him at? Is he sleeping on somebody's couch? What's going on? Not freaking out thinking that he died. Not in a hysterical moment like she's in, where she's thinking, oh my God, what happens? And then they say, okay, he brings it out. They start driving towards 34 Fairview. And we're gonna watch this in just a moment, because she says this is a remarkable moment, because even though it's snowing, even though it's dark, even though nobody can see anything at this particular juncture, the defendant screams, stop, let me out. And he says, she shouldn't have been able to see John O'Keefe, but she knows where he is. She knows exactly where he is, because she knows where she left him. And that's the allegation. That's how he ties all this in. She didn't discover him. She led them to him because she already knew. And look, guys, this is devastating for Karen Reed. And this is a brilliant move by Hank Brennan as he brings this in at a point where the defense can't rebut it. So he doesn't have to prove what happened during those 28 minutes with any certainty. He just has to prove that, listen, what happened? Why did it take 28 minutes? Now, of course, to me, one of the things is you say it should have taken 10 minutes, but it's a snowstorm. Maybe she's driving slow. But what was going on? But what this does is this speaks to a consciousness of guilt on Karen Reed's part. Why wouldn't, if the jury accepts that, oh my God, that's what she must have done, and that explains her behavior, and that explains her franticness, then that becomes something that the jury in that jury room can latch onto. That becomes the moment that the jury is going to say, hey, this is how someone in that jury room convinces the holdouts and says, wait a minute, guys, how can you explain that? Okay, let's just say, because remember, they don't have Higgins on the stand. They have Higgins and then play wrestling and play fighting, but they don't have the visuals that this first jury had, which led them to a hung jury. What they have is they have data. They have a story that the defense is throwing to them and saying, well, wait a minute here. We have these questions and we have these concerns and if we have the potential dog bite, but the state comes in and says, listen, if you accept the experts of the state, they give a plausible explanation, which if the jury chooses to adopt this and says, look, we're going to go to the simplest explanation. And the simplest explanation is Karen Reed is drunk. They get in a fight. She accelerates at 75% max speed and plows into John O'Keefe. And boom, John O'Keefe is down. And she drives off, goes home, makes all these phone calls because she realizes what she's done. She's covering this up. She passes out, then wakes back up and says, oh my God, did I remember that correctly? Is that what I did? Drives back to 34 Fairview, confirms it, doesn't call 911 then either, and then drives over to Kerry Roberts' house and says, oh, this, it begins. did a snowplow hit John? And she leads him directly to him. And when nobody else can see him, jumps out of the car. And this jury is going to be sitting back and going, okay, everybody that knows everything knows that, yes, if the state puts all these other witnesses on, they withheld the witnesses and they didn't put them before the jury, and they didn't get to put the third-party culprit defense up, and they didn't put Higgins on, and they didn't put the Alperts on, and they didn't develop any of these things. They just said, okay, this is a bad investigation. Proctor didn't investigate. There's the potential. The experts say that these things could. But if the jury adopts and says, no, wait a minute, we're going to look at her behavior. Now, listen, I believe firmly that looking at this case, there is definite reasonable doubt in this case that should lead to a not guilty verdict. So I don't want this to get crossed up. But if we don't get to a not guilty verdict, if Karen Reed is convicted, I believe it will be this right here. I believe it will be what we just went over. And I'm going to leave you with that portion of the closing argument. I believe it is that argument that Hank Brennan made, and it's a brilliant argument. Whether you love him, like him, or dislike him, or wherever you fall in the case, what he did was brilliant lawyering. And he's a defense attorney by trade. And he knew how to make this case, and he knew how to anchor this for the jury and throw it back there. And again, we'll see what happens. But the longer this jury's out, the longer you're going to see the potential that it's something like this. It's this argument tied in with everything else, the data. And they say, listen, it's the simplest explanation. Yeah, there's some irregularities. Yeah, there were some issues. Yeah, Higgins is upset. But all of that is coincidences. It's coincidences because they were expecting him to come to the party. They were expecting him. And they didn't make it to the party. But at the end of the day, Karen Reed's behavior, that's what the state's trying to make it. So watch closely, guys. I hope that this does not result in what I think it could be. But if it does, this is why. Give me your thoughts. Let me know what you think. I'm going to leave you with the full excerpt of the closing argument, and I'll talk to you guys soon. And, look, we'll see how long this jury's out. I think we're going to have a verdict by the end of the week. I think this jury will come to a verdict because I think this case was left a lot less ambiguity, a lot less. It was a lot more concise, and I think that there's fuel for either side to get to a verdict. But I'm a little concerned. I'm a little concerned because I think that there's a lot of people out here that are judging this case are not judging it by what actually happened in that courtroom with the way the state went in and did what they did in the Ty Tucker case, where they just basically cleaned the case up. They cleaned up the witnesses that they didn't want. They cleaned up the noise, and they made a case. They made a very, 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 very concise case, and it's one that a jury looking at this set of facts, accepting this 38-minute or this 28-minute gap, these are the things that guilty verdicts are made of. So watch closely, guys. We'll cue this up and watch this through.
Leaves Meadows. She leaves. And Kaylee is behind waiting. And you see her back up, and Judd Welch just showed you all of those demonstrations where you could see the unsettled snow in the back, and after the bump you can see the pieces missing. No taillight. There's no taillight on the ground, all the white snow. There's no crack, there's no break. It's a nudge. It's a nudge. But the taillight has already been broken because when you look at the video, not one little piece, it's still framed, little angle with the light, the brakes are on. You take a look, you'll be able to slow it down. You'll see the exact same piece is missing because it's back at Fairview. That's why it's missing. It's not there, it's back at Fairview. And then she leaves at 5:07. She gets to Jen McCabe's about, 5:35. 28 minutes. It's about a 10-minute ride. Where did she go in 28 minutes? Where did she go? We don't know. We don't have data for that. But we know when she gets to Jen McCabe's house, she is panicked, frantic, out of her mind, screaming, waking everybody up. Jen McCabe comes down. Can't understand her. going out to the car to try to console her. Why is she so frantic? Why can't she speak? Why can't she say a word? Because John went out and had a drink and fell asleep on a couch? Because John would maybe be cheating on her? What is causing this extraordinary duress? Did she stop somewhere on the way by? Did she just see death? Kerry Roberts comes, take charge kind of person. She pulls him behind, she sees the broken taillight in Jen McCabe's driveway, and she decides she's gonna commandeer this. We're going back to Meadows, you're gonna follow me, leave the car, I'll drive. At this point, Jen and Kerry don't know each other. They've only met once. And they go back to Meadows, they obviously don't find John because he's back at 34 Fairview. And then they start their way towards 34 Fairview. They start driving towards 34 Fairview, and they're looking. And you heard from Kerry Roberts, Jen McCabe, they're looking out the window, they can't see a thing. The snow, the blizzard, the weather, the darkness, they can't see anything. And they're driving, and they decide they're going back to 34 Fairview, and this is remarkable. This is remarkable. When they start their way past towards 34 Fairview, they get close. And when they get close, they can see nothing. But the defendant screams, "Stop, let me out." And they look around and they say, "What? Let me out, let me out." She does not see John O'Keefe. She knows where he is. She knows exactly where he is. She knows where to find him. She knows where to expect to find them because she knows where she left him. She tells us. Slide 13, please.
Driving, Jen's in the passenger seat. And I described this to everyone, so you've probably heard this before, but John looked like a buffalo on the prairie. It was just a lawn and a heat that it wasn't a bush or a hydrant or a dog. It was a weird shaped lump at that time in those elements. And I was looking to find him on the side of the road. I was expecting I'd find him.
Thank you.